Come, all you moonshiners, if you want to hear.
Well, welcome back for another edition and an update on Big Blue. So, for all of you hobbyists out there and everybody else who's in our community, don't forget, comment below, subscribe, share us with your friends. Good, that's out of the way. Now, on to business. Our update is that we're at the point now to where we have finished, excuse me, we finished the outflow pipe with our condenser in it. Now, I showed you that already once, and that condenser goes from here to here. And this is just a pipe up here, and I ran it today. What I did was I used a small fountain pump, and that's a really, if you look at that, that's a really small fountain pump. I mean, and these are really good to use, provided you're pumping across, okay? So if you're gonna pump from any, if you require any height, like, you know, you got your bucket way down here and you got your still way up here, you need to get a little bit larger one that'll pump a little bit higher. But that one will pump great straight across, and they're really, really cheap. They run somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $11, so they're real simple. So what happened was today I hooked it up and I pumped water in here and out here, and I let it run for 3 or 4 hours, and I was just recycling that water back into the same bucket, just like you would, and I just checking for leaks and everything, and it worked perfectly. So I'm all set. Now all I've got to do is attach this to my compression fitting up there and make sure that's all sealed. Okay, now we had another question, and oh, by the way, thanks for all the comments that you sent in and people who were concerned about my safety. I do appreciate it. I put a gland plug fitting on the end of this enclosure for that heater element. So for those of you who mentioned, someone may walk by and kick. We don't want to jerk those out of there and cause it. That's all set. Good. Now, someone else wrote in and they want to know if we were going to use any kind of control device. And I've already mentioned once, yes, I am a very big fan of the PID controller, proportional integral derivative. And the best way to explain that is, the best analogy that I can come up with, and it really does make sense, it's like cruise control in the car. If you set the mileage, your car will achieve that and stay there. If it goes over, it shuts off and it just kind of rolls back. If it goes too slow, it adds more fuel. You know what I'm talking about. So that's what a cruise control does. Well, guess what? A PID does the same thing with temperature. It's a little bit more in depth, but that's a really, really good analogy. So I'm going to put together a PID, and this is not going to be a wiring a PID film or video, because I've already got those out there, but I'm just going to show you what I'm working with. And I've got just an electrical box here. I put a solid state relay in there. That's the 25DA. There are DAs and AAs. The DA is the one that we use, and the DA represents DC current in for the signal, which is produced by the PID, to control an AC connector on the outside, which controls the heater element. So you've got the PID's the switch that operates the solid state relay. The solid state relay is the switch that operates the element. Make sense? Sure does. Okay, and it really, really works well. There's another model called an AA, and that is an AC signaling line in to operate the solid state relay for an AC switch controlled on the output, which means that at that point, this PID would not be worth it to you because it has a DC signal for the output. So, I'll warn you ahead of time. So there are people that have bought the AA model instead of the DA model. Okay, if you buy the AA model, there are ways around that we'll get into in another video. Okay, I put another one of those gland fittings on the end here, so it'll hold that cable in there, and I'll set that aside. Oh, I got a 40 millimeter hole I drilled there for my 240 volt 20 amp plug or receptacle for my plug, and I have already mounted my PID, proportional integral derivative controller. Just briefly, since I'm using now we already know I'm using a 2500 watt, 240 volt element. So, and I've got the 25 amp DA, that's a 25 amp solid state relay, direct current in for signaling, controls an AC connector out. We want to know, will that handle it? And real easy, let me do the math and I'll just explain it to you, and it's real simple. Listen to this. 2500 watts divided by 240 volts at peak usage. That means when I turn it on, it's on 100%. That only comes to 10.41 amps, 10 and a half amps, okay? This is a 25 amp solid state relay. So what do you think? More than enough, all right? Now just keep in mind that in comparison, the 2000 watt element at 120 volts is 16.6 amps. So you got to think, see, that's why I always say that 240 is a little bit more efficient and in some cases a lot safer. So just keep that in mind. It's totally up to you. All right, I will wire this together, have this set up and ready to go. It's as simple as that, believe it or not. I'm straightforward at this point. And when this is all finished and done, it shall look like this. I'm not even going to put an on-off switch because I'm just going to use the plug. I'll plug it in, it'll work. I'll get this running, and we'll have my output pipe attached to the top of my still. We're going to run our maiden voyage, and that will come up very shortly. So I'll see you. I'll be back tomorrow, but in a matter of fact, it's going to follow right behind this. So until then, you hang in there, and we'll see you shortly. Oh yeah, you caught me. I'm filling up the cooler with water. I've got ice in here up to about, probably back here. I just want this to last a long time. The ice has nothing to do with a little bit with the efficiency, but all it does is prolong the water, okay? That's why I don't have to run it out of the faucet and out on the ground, because we're going to run this for quite a while. Oh yeah, by the way, we're getting ready to run. Big Blue. So, let me finish this up and I'll be back. Well, we're on to our final step because we've got Big Blue already topped off. We've got 4.5 gallons of that peach mash in here, and it was smelling good going in. I know it's going to be great coming out. I've also mixed up some flour and water, and it just makes a flour paste. Now, yes, you can use Bisquick. Oh my goodness, you can use oatmeal. I mean, there's a bunch of different stuff out there that you can use. So whatever makes you happy. I just like to use this because it's a whole lot easier for me to work with anyway. What I did was, and you'll see this connection right here from my outflow pipe. What I theorized was, hey, when I'm done and I take this apart, I want to put it away. That's going to be awful difficult to put away the way it's made. I said, so if I soldered that pipe in there, it would be there permanently. I went, got an idea. We'll just use the paste. And then that way, when it's finished, and of course it's going to stick in there real good. When it's finished, I can always break it apart and store it. So Big Blue can be used over and over again. Now, and I noticed that when I did my my test run, because I ran about 4 gallons of this already with water, I had ever so slightly a leak on the bottom of this compression fitting. And I thought, I'm not going to mess with that. I mean, if that's all it's doing, you never know what's going to happen to it. So I put a little bit of paste around that as well. Now, that's really all I need. You'll see here that I've got my ice cooler up here. And remember, that ice cooler was full of ice. You caught me filling it with water. Hint to self, move it up first, then fill it with water. I had a hard time moving that once it was full. Lesson learned. And I'm pumping, see, I'm using one of them small fountain pumps. And just to show you that it will work, but I'm pumping from almost the same level as the still, because I'm actually pumping over and down into this pipe and the condenser, the torpedo condenser in here, and it comes back out the top and goes back in. Now, had I needed to pump from a lower portion, a lower level, and pump up to this, I would have used a larger pump. But for simplicity, I mean, it may not look all that pretty, but I'll sure to tell you what, it works exactly the same way, and it works really good. So I'm up to 90.3 degrees, and I've got my set value at 100, because what I want to do now, listen to this carefully. This is critical, especially for anybody who has a column or still like this, and you're using a PID to control it. You have to first go through what we call balancing the still. Remember, the energy going in at the bottom is not equal to the energy at the top, at least not yet. So set your PID for 100, 110, 120, somewhere in that neighborhood until it balances. And that is that the temperature here and the temperature here are the same. Because if you don't, if you recall, when you run it, see, it's not warm yet. When you run it with propane, you'll notice, if you remember, when you turn it on, you'll hit your temperature and then you turn it down, and all of a sudden the temperature goes way down. You start to inch it up and it goes way, so you're chasing that temperature back and forth. Well, the same thing is necessary if you're using propane. You've got to get your still and your column to balance. So that way, thermal energy inside equals to this thermal energy, and then when you change this, not directly, but almost instantaneously, this temperature changes as well, because the whole thing is thermally balanced. When it's not thermally balanced, energy input here, there's a lag time between here and here. When it gets here and it's sensed, there's already more energy here that hasn't arrived here yet. So that's why you wind up with that, you're chasing that temperature back and forth. Give it 10 or 15 minutes, it'll balance, and then set your PID to a higher temperature and let her run. That's my hint for today. Okay, we'll be back as soon as this thing starts cranking up or gets close, and we'll start to pull off our 4 shots. A little bit of methanol that I'm anticipating. Loving it. Well, we are making progress. I am going to pull this up. Well, I've got about 2 ounces of the heads there. That's the 4 shots, and I've already tested it, so I'm really onto a blue flame, which is really, really hard to see. It's almost transparent. So I'm getting ready to change out, and then I wanted to show you this, that I'm set at 165, and right now I just overshot that a little bit, so my PID's thinking there, it went out. I'm going to turn this up to 172, and we're going to change out jars here in a few minutes and start collecting. See, what I'm doing now is I'm actually trying to find the sweet spot of Old Blue. Old Blue is now producing. So I'm at, I got it set at 179. It's right now it's hovering at 180. I've got a feeling, and now Old Blue's working, but I got a feeling that Old Blue's going to have a little bit of a higher sweet spot. And as I've told you on many stills, and yours may be 184, 189, some are even as low as 170. But it all depends a lot on where you're checking the temperature at. If you do that routinely at the same spot each time, then you'll have your own data point. And also the design of the still itself. It's not that the vaporization temperature scientifically has changed. It's just that wherever you're measuring, that's the temperature that your still is balanced at, and your vaporization is happening, but you're measuring at a different place. So that's all we need to know. We just need to know, where is my sweet spot? And I'm getting close to finding this one. I'm guessing it's going to be around 185. So I'm going to set this for 185, and we'll try that. Well, it appears we've found our sweet spot. That's a combination of drips and pours. I think I'll go up 1 more degree. Well, my friends, everything after this is kind of elementary. We're going to let this continue to run. I'll make my cuts. Now, normally, I'll make my cut. Actually, my final collection would be 100 proof or 204 degrees. I actually use those 2 data points together to ensure that I never get a tail. I'd rather not collect the tails than to take a chance and taint a jar of some good hearts. So I'm also not using a Parrot because a parrot's just really not applicable in this setup. But then again, remember, this was supposed to be something that you have laying around that you could fashion together, and we've proved it, that we can fashion together Old Blue here from an old pot we had laying in the shed and a few other nitinoid pieces. And I think I've probably got, now the silicone was probably the most expensive. I've probably got 50 bucks into it, maybe something like that. But you know, I'm real happy with it, and my sweet spot on this still is actually 191. So I'm going to have to rethink that 204 portion, and I'll have to rely more on my proof. So when I start getting down close to the 100 proof mark, I'll have to make a data point of what my temperature is when I can get those to balance, and that will tell me what Old Blue's operating left and right limits are. So, you know, I've got a special coming up on the next video, oh, by the way, so please make sure you stay tuned. I've got something really, really special. And until next time, oh yeah, happy distilling.